Thank you, Laura. Hearing that list, I'm not busy at all. So I have lots of time to be with you tonight, but honestly, this is an amazing week to be part of. And I am so grateful for the opportunity and for Stephen and Kevin and the team here. And the week that you guys are getting to partake in, I'm so jealous. I just want to come and join in on all the panels and the different chapels that you guys have been learners at. So who am I? Laura mentioned a few things about me. I wrote a book. I'm a recovering perfectionist. Don't take that lightly. And I'm a teacher and a student and a wife and a mother. And it dawned on me as I was preparing for the talk tonight that the talk that I'm going to give you isn't my story anymore. It is this little guy's story. If you want to put up the first slide, Stephen. So this is my little Peanut, who's not so little anymore. That was taken about 3 months after he was born. His name is Thatcher. And he is now 11 months and probably the size of both of those zucchinis put together. But this was taken last summer in the midst of our harvest. And why this story isn't just my story anymore is we always didn't want to have kids. My husband and I were kind of in this conversation of, well, is that just the thing you do? And we kind of go against that, as you'll see in this story. So we just didn't want to assume that we just wanted to have kids. We really wanted to have a kid for the right reasons. And I don't know that there's a right reason or a right time, but this is the story about how Thatcher got here in a very appropriate way. So the grand experiment of starting a homestead, we did not intentionally do this at all. It happened kind of by accident. And it's a bit crazy for two kids who, my husband and I, didn't know anything about farming. I'm from Seattle. Anybody? Okay. And my husband's from Santa Barbara. Yes. Rough place to grow up. I pity you. Yeah. So we are two kids that grew up in suburbia, know nothing about farming, know nothing about raising vegetables, and something just got into me when I moved to LA, and I don't know if it was just living 2 blocks from the freeway, but I needed some fresh produce. I needed some fresh herbs in my life, and so we started a little herb garden, and it completely failed. I mean, green thumb, I have the opposite of that. So I'm sitting here going, I don't know why I want to keep doing this, but as we started to look for houses, something was really never compromised in our house search, and that was that I wanted space for a garden. So we're looking, and as long as the patio faced the right direction of the sun, and I didn't even know what that meant at the time, but I'm like, I need just like a little tiny bit to grow some food. And we bought this house, and the house we walked into, we bought in 2008, which is at the beginning of the recession. And the family that had vacated the house ended up trashing it before they left it. They took a BB gun and shot out all the windows upstairs. They punched holes in the walls. There was a gas leak. There was just animal stuff all over the place. I mean, it was disgusting. And so we had sunk our savings and our whole life into this house. And we walk in the first night, and I just break down in tears. And we're walking around the house, and I'm just thinking, God, what did we do? Like, we really believe that you've given us this house to not just be our house, but how do we make this a home? Like, the whole thing is pink carpet and gray paint and just destroyed. And I have to admit that like a little piece of my soul kind of died in that instance, because here it was supposed to be this American dream. And I don't equate the American dream with Christianity. I don't think God promises me that. But we were given this privilege of getting this house. And we had to really, the first thing we did when we walked over that threshold was pray. And we prayed that our house wouldn't be our own. And then the second thing we did after kind of getting our bearings after a few weeks was we planted 2 vegetable beds. And so the backyard looked something like this. Go to the second picture. This is the only picture actually, oh, there was a picture in between there. There we go. This is the only picture I actually have of the backyard when there was nothing back there. That's the house behind. No, I'm just kidding. What were they thinking? So that tiny little compost bin in the back on the right, that's me on the far left, but this was at a bridal shower that I was throwing. And this literally, we have this little plot of land in Monrovia, California, just straight up the 605. You'll dead end at Monrovia and Duarte. So we get this yard, and there's a good quarter of an acre of land, which in LA, that's nothing to laugh about. And all of it is grass. And so we're sitting there and we're going, okay, how do we keep this grass going? And grass, actually, a fun little fact, is the #1 crop growing in America. So can't say that you didn't learn anything tonight. But what ended up happening is that we had to let the grass die because it was costing too much money. It cost us $150 a month to keep our grass green. And so we didn't budget for that. We weren't planning on spending an extra over $1,000 a year to keep our grass green. And when the grass dies, you see that house on the block, and you know that something is going on there. You drive by, and we were in a neighborhood where the neighbors kind of knew each other, but kind of didn't know each other, and people were definitely starting to whisper. It was just like, what's going on? They just bought that house. They're letting their grass grow. What's going on? There's something wrong. And there was something wrong, and something deeper was happening. And so when we started to plant our vegetables, they started to taste better. We started to uproot the grass, and go to the next picture. And this was the dirtiest day of my life. That's what I like to call it. That's me, with this thing that like compresses ground. And you can see we're starting to build 2 more vegetable beds in the back. And that structure in the back is actually an old horse and buggy structure on our property. So as we're learning about this property that God has given to us, we're learning that the tree on the right is a fig tree. I didn't even know what a fig was before I moved to Southern California. And so I'm looking at this fruit, I'm like, is this edible? The birds like it. I don't really know what to do with it. But if you wrap it in bacon and stuff it with cheese, the world is gonna have peace. I mean, it's just, it's amazing. So we start building these vegetable beds, and we start to notice this transformation happening. We go to the next picture. We're gonna stream through these a bit quicker. I end up reading Barbara Kingsolver's Animal Vegetable Miracle, which transformed my life. And God used that to show me a different way of living off of our land, of living within a 100-mile radius of our food. So most of your food travels 1,000 miles to be on your plate, minimum. And what does it look like to eat locally? And these are words that are thrown around, they're really hot topics right now, but we didn't really happen into them because it was hipster. We just wanted to do it because the food tasted better. And all of a sudden we started reading about animal treatment. And at this point, I'm starting to ask questions of God, of like, what does this mean to live life differently? And so this is our chicken condo on the right, and our chicken run, and we have to have it fully enclosed. It's a huge space. It's about 4 feet by 10 feet. I don't know any math majors in the room, do the math. But it's a huge space for chickens. And we get our community involved, and we end up forming a chicken co-op with 4 other families in our home. So meanwhile, and I'm sure some of you are listening like, what is the point of this? She is just going more and more hippie. And sure enough, my mother calls me crunchy. It's her word for granola. And she just thinks I've like gone off the deep end. So, but what was happening is, and one more picture. Okay, so this is now what it looks like in the summer. This doesn't look like today. We've got corn. We've got zucchinis going on, we've got more squash over here, we've got some tomatoes in the back, and then there's another picture, I think the next one's the front yard. Oh, this is the orchard. So we started asking ourselves questions about how we could even live differently. We're receiving gifts. And so we asked our family for fruit trees for Christmas one year. And they start giving us fruit trees and doing this. Oh, go back one second. Oh, wait, go back. Can we go back to a picture? There we go, that one. We start using all of our cardboard as mulch. We start putting wood chips on top of it. We start planting trees. We now have 26 fruit trees, and our fruit is starting to come in right now. It's a totally different way of living. And now go to the next picture. We added in more beds and more trees. That's a pomegranate tree, some kale, I took that last week, some lemons, some oranges, and the next picture. So this is our front yard. So we even went crazier. We tore up the front yard, planted it, put more vegetables in. And this past week, somebody knocks on my door, and I go to the door. and it's a lawn salesman. And why a lawn salesman is traveling around in a drought, the mysteries of the universe. But he tries to sell us nutrients for our front yard. And I really recognized this as a spiritual encounter in that moment. And I said, we're trying to do something different here. And he kind of looks around, he looks at the yard, and I assumed that he looked at the yard when he came up to the front door. It's kind of hard to miss it. There's blueberries, there's asparagus growing, there's a whole field of strawberries in the back and apple trees. And he goes, well, I think some of your plants need some nutrients. And I'm going, okay, well, if by that you mean chemicals, we also have food growing in the front. And then he just stops talking. He's like, what? Okay. And so all that to say, he ended up saying, I said, we're trying to do something different. If a plant doesn't live here, then we're going to replace it with something that's supposed to be here. And he didn't know what to say. He was completely speechless. And he goes, oh, that's great. And he ended up turning around and walking away. And what I realized in that moment is that my hope and my faith on earth is about seeds. It's about these plants. It's about God's work in this ecosystem around me. It's not insecurity and money anymore. And our yard has taught us that. So I share this journey of these pictures. We're going to leave this one up for a bit, to enter into a different kind of dialogue about what faith has mean. And I call it the problem of James. I wish that James wasn't in the Bible, that works, didn't have something to do with our faith, because they do. And so this home that we now have restored and built into really just something the community is eyeballing is about seeds. It's about seeds of faith. It's about planting. It's about harvesting. It's about seasons. And the soil around me has become my classroom and my teacher. And the funny thing is when we ripped down a fence and we did this to our front yard, we've now lived here for 6 years, the community noticed too. There's an elementary school a few blocks up from our house, so kids walk by on their way to school and on their way home. And one year, when it didn't look like this, we didn't know what to do, so we just threw a bunch of pumpkin seeds out there and had a pumpkin patch in our front yard. And we didn't really know if people were paying attention. We didn't really care. But this little kid, we have the front door open, and he walks by with his mom, and he doesn't know that we're listening. He can't see us from where we're seated in the living room. And we just hear this little kid break down, and he goes, Mom, where are the pumpkins? Because at this point, we've ripped them all out. It's harvest time. They're gone. And we are sitting in our living room, you guys, and Nate and I, that's my husband, we're looking at each other, and we're like, oh my gosh, this kid has developed this relationship with our land, and we didn't even know. And chances are he's never seen a pumpkin grow. He didn't even know how it formed, and he's formed this relationship with these little tiny green balls that have grown into these big, huge orange things. And it's not the petting zoo pumpkin thing down the road. It's like an actual plant. And we were just flabbergasted. We had no idea that our community was interacting with us. And so from that, it was more seeds, and we realized that our neighbors were really invested in this. We started going to gardening classes with our neighbor that lives next door to us. He's a single guy. He works at the local high school teaching math. Now he has a garden. Our family that lives to the next of us started doing an orange tree. We're like, what is going on? What's happening here? And the Bible, interestingly, to shift gears a little bit, is not silent on this issue. When I started really paying attention, God uses nature and the local environment to teach us awe and to inspire us. Psalms 19 says, the heavens declare the glory of God. The skies proclaim the work of his hands. Day after day they pour forth speech. Night after night they display knowledge. There is no speech nor language where their voice is not heard. Their voice goes out into all the earth, their words to the ends of the world. In the heavens he has pitched a tent for the sun. And so the story of starting a homestead and how it just made sense to us is that we started listening to these rhythms, not of technology, but of the seasons of the earth. For we are citizens of the earth, of the sky, of the heavens, and of the soil. And as the Lord's Prayer says, on earth as it is in heaven. What does that mean? We've really wrestled with this as we've been on this journey. Theologian and scholar Ellen Davis's ideas really remarkable in terms of her work of going back into the Bible and recognizing it as an agrarian text. That's what she says. She says the writers of the Bible never knew a world without agriculture. They understood the seasons and the rhythms and the patterns of the sun. Like literally, I know the path of the sun and the season. If you would have asked me that 10 years ago, I would have been like, what the heck are you talking about? But the sun actually moves depending on where it is. It rises over here in the winter and over here in the summer. Don't ask me where this is exactly, but it moves. She also has done some great work, this is Ellen Davis again, about humus, which is another word for soil. It's the stuff that breaks down. And humans, it's the same root word. And if you think about the creation of humans, that's really, really important to wrap our minds around. That God was really intentional about creating us from dust, from dirt. Dirt is a good word in our house. It's a relationship that is mutually beneficial or one of mutual suffering, as we see with the fall and what happens. Cain especially is punished when his relationship with the soil is not a beneficial one. And so we see God really wanting us to interact in this whole system. And her commentary on the first sin is that the first sin of eating, was not really about eating, but it was about taking without observing, about taking without gratitude for the whole process, about not being able to slow down. And I just think that that's really, really beautiful about how we're manipulating goodness. How we're in a culture where I'm sure you're feeling at this time in the semester, I know my students are, the busyness. How are you? I'm busy. And busy is kind of this thing that just penetrates us, and it's okay because it's normal. But how do we take in the whole? How do we readjust our position? And I have learned it's not about always having enough, but being a participant in the deeper web of life that embraces both life and death, both drought and abundance. It's about being responsible to the gifts and the world that God has given to me. And I don't tell you this story of our homestead so that you all go out and rip out the lawn in Biola and start planting vegetables. That would be beautiful. But to really think about these ideas of drought and abundance and the fact that California is in a really bad drought right now. That there is a time to rejoice and a time to prosper, as well as weep and mourn. One of the things that we've really had to wrestle with having chickens is, okay, well, what do you do when they stop laying eggs? And what do we do if we choose to eat meat? I don't know how many of you think of the grocery store as an ethical place, but we have come to see it as that. And if we choose to eat meat, then what does that mean? And so we actually went through the process of what's called a culling, and we ended up killing our first batch of chickens. And that was one of the most Eucharistic things I've ever done. And I can't even describe the emotions of that day that we went through with our community, of watching something die. And I know that some of you in this room have grown up on farms, and that's just part of your life. But that day I really felt like I became a citizen of the world. That this opportunity that so many people just go and do, we have a privilege at the grocery store when everything is clean and wrapped up and packaged so beautifully. We don't get to see that process. And this process, I think, is integral to the world that God has created for us. My life lessons now are learned from seeds and from chickens. And I know, again, that this is not for everyone. But I'm telling our story tonight to realize that the privilege that we have was something that I really needed to acknowledge. And as we kept growing more trees, it wasn't always growth. There was tree rot, and there were insects, and there were pests, and there were things that we had to contend with. I learned to love ladybugs. I learned to love bats. Bats eat mosquitoes. They're lovely. I learned to be okay with the seasons of life in terms of both abundance and both grief and death, and to sit in that tension. And that's what by creating our home has taught me. It becomes something to face and not avoid. And Ecclesiastes 3 is really what led me back to school to study theology and ecology. There's a time for everything, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to pluck up what is planted, a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to break down and a time to build up, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance, a time to throw away stones, a time to gather stones together, a time to embrace, a time to refrain from embracing, a time to seek and a time to lose, a time to keep, a time to throw away, a time to tear and a time to sow, a time to keep silence and a time to speak, a time to love and a time to hate, a time for war and a time for peace. And what I found really intriguing going back to Ecclesiastes 3 in preparation for today is that it ends with comments about our fates always being the same, the animals and the humans. That we should enjoy our work. It's a passage about work. For me, my life is about living to work, not working to live. And just thinking about that statement again. Live to work instead of work to live. So many people in our culture just want to live for the weekends. You know, you wait all week for Friday, you wait for the weekend, you wait for Christmas break, you wait for spring break. But what are you missing in those times of tension? What are you missing when you just want to get through the grief, get through the disease, get through these things? God is in those times too. So as Frederick Buechner says, the place where the world's deep need and my joy meet is what I've found in creating this homestead. God never promised me comfort or ease, but he did promise a life lived in peacemaking, both for humans and for our ecosystems. So part of my intentionality with today is to leave you with this, of what do we do with these seasons of life? I teach a lot about the hero's journey and different philosophies in terms of how we just go through cycles, how it's not this stair stepping up to some place where God wants us to go. God keeps us on these journeys of revelation, of purpose, of vocation, of finding out the work that we're supposed to be doing, the problem of James again. And so there's some things that you can do, that we ought to do. And this week is a great starting place. And so I know that you guys might not own a home. You might not have a lawn to rip up. Even though let's all plot, let's go outside. No, I'm just kidding. So go to the next slide. So what can you do? These are just a few really tangible things. And that is my thing as a practical theologian. I want to give you actual practical things that you can do if this is speaking to you, if it's someplace where you want to invest in. You can plant trees. I know you heard about that this morning. Hopefully some of you went to the panel yesterday with Abundant Table Project and learned about different ways to farm, different internships you could get involved with. And I know some of you are going, what the heck is she talking about? So hopefully this is a practical list that reaches even one of you. But eating more vegetables, that really helps. It really helps our economy. It helps your health. And it helps cut down on carbon emissions. It's really a beautiful thing to eat vegetables. And 3 things down, I have cook more. Because one of the issues is that we don't know how to cook vegetables. And so we think we all just need to walk around munching a carrot. So if you have a chance to connect with somebody who has a kitchen, or if there's kitchens on campus or in your apartments, invest in cooking. It's one of the best skills that you can have. And it's something that has brought my husband and I so close together. It's a thing we do to debrief our day. And it's been a really beautiful spiritual practice to just come in and debrief. And it's tangible, you guys. It's not like a paper that you're sweating over. You get to cook in 30 minutes and then eat it. It's amazing. So using less water is also something that we can be doing, especially right now in this drought that we're having. So do you need a shower every day? Something I ask myself every day. But can you cut it back a few minutes? These are really tangible things. And it's also scary to think about that all of our aqueducts are actually built on fault lines, and we had 2 earthquakes last week. So we really need to start taking water seriously and think about it in sustainable ways. Plant something. The city of Los Angeles actually just passed a bill that makes seed bombing legal. Now, if you don't know what seed bombing is, this is really cool. So people get together and make little packets of like mud and then press little seeds in it, and they go to public spaces and they can throw these seed bombs. I mean, talk about like healthy drive-bys. Like, this is so great. And you get to go and you can throw carrots into a parkway. I mean, that's so awesome. So look up this stuff because it's really cool. And it helps people. You know, this guy in Compton, I think it was Compton, he was getting in trouble for planting a raised bed. You know the part that's in between the sidewalk and the street? You know what I'm talking about? That's actually owned by the city. Well, it's unused space, it's just grass. Grass is pointless in California. Don't even get me started on that. We're a desert culture. So if we're gonna water things, why not water things we can eat? Just makes sense, right? So finally, this man in Compton, he went to city council and got it reversed so people can plant food in the parkways. I mean, give it up for that guy. That's amazing. And we can drive less. Really, carpool with friends. And maybe you guys are already doing this because you're college students and it just economically makes sense for you guys. So maybe I'm talking to other people in this one. But these are ways of things you can do now that I think are spiritually really relevant. I'll get to that in a second, but go to the next slide first. So what can you learn? Because let's be honest, you're in college right now. You're learning a lot. So we can invest in getting to know a farm. That's happening this week. Tomorrow there's a farmer's market on campus. That's really cool. I think you get a free fish taco too if you go. If you go on the organic farm tour, you get a free fish taco. This is what I'm being told. Do that. That just makes sense, right? So get to know a farm. When you have the opportunity, go visit a farm. Find out how your food grows. Find out how it gets to your table. Because really, the people on those farms, there's a reason why your tomato costs 13 cents. These are moral, ethical, spiritual issues. These are people that God has created and God loves. People that if you drive up to 126, they're out there in 90, 100, 115 degree heat picking food. These are things we have to be thinking about in this world. Read the Farm Bill. It's not fun, but that affects you. It really does. And maybe I can convince one person in this room to read it. But being aware of food policy, we all have to eat. And so if we only leave the good eating up to the people who can afford whole foods, I think that's an ethical issue. Know what's in your food. Subway just got in trouble for putting the same chemical that's in yoga mats in their bread. Know what's in your food. That's case in point. I'm moving on. Next one. So, come back to me. I know, shocker. It's out. You can eat at Subway now. So most importantly about this rhythm of life and these busyness is spiritually, what can we do? And I want to say that the epidemic of your generation is going to be being distracted. That it's that we walk around like this. That most of you should go into chiropractic because that's going to be a really good investment, okay? We're all going to have like huge neck and shoulder issues. Turn off your phone. Really, the world isn't going to end tonight. I'm 99.9% sure. Pay attention to the ecosystem around you. We like to pay attention to people, which is great, but what is the history of a place, not only in its people, but in the land? Learning the story of the trees and the birds, like does anybody know the type of trees that are growing on your campus? Does anybody know the deeper story that's happening? Learn from those people, because there's a web of creation that needs our attention. And I am not saying that you all need to start homesteads, but something has transformed me in doing this and positioning myself not as an overlord and not as a manipulator of nature, but as letting it teach me things. And what I have learned is the story of faith like a mustard seed means a whole different thing when I'm holding a literal mustard seed in my hand. And every time, you guys, I see a seed, and we've been doing this for 8 years now, every time I see a seed come through the earth, it's a miracle. Because I doubt it every time. That is my faith. I doubt it. I think that's not going to happen. It's not going to come through. And every single time, I let God surprise me. Or God surprises me. God does what God does. But so let nature be your teacher, because God is in it too. and the birth and the dying. And the awesome thing about a seed, you guys, is the way that it gives back, the way that it keeps producing, it has to die. So this whole idea of forever young, of trying to chase after this never-ending ideal, is that I think that that's what it means to keep dying to ourselves. We need to learn from the plants. In the birth and the dying, in the heavens and the dirt, pay attention. Get dirty. It will change your soul. And that's my prayer for you all, because that's my prayer for my son. He's here now because we want him to be a learner and a contributor and not just a consumer. We are in a state in the world where we can't just be takers anymore. And you're at a great place at Biola where you're not just takers. You guys give a lot. But how are you going to think about your life in this place and outside of this place as not just consumers? And that's why we chose to have a child, because we want to raise him differently. So don't let this conversation be about just this week. Let it be a conversation starter with your friends, your university, your family, and with God. Let's pray.
We hope you enjoyed this message. Biola University offers a variety of biblically centered degree programs, ranging from business to ministry to the arts and sciences. Learn more at biola.edu.